So I think I will be short, but then we always think we're going to be short, right? But I don't have, I only have one page of notes. First of all, thank you to Richard. I really appreciate the invitation to come, especially as I'm not a specialist in Islamic apocalyptic. And I have to say just one more introductory comment, which was that I was delighted to hear the name of Ehud Sprinzak, who was actually an early mentor of mine and a great loss to the world with his early death. So that was kind of nice. As some of you who know me well know, I work in the area of the Christian apocalyptic. I've done some comparative work, particularly when it comes to use of the internet and computer-mediated communication. So I've looked at the similarities and differences of Jewish, Muslim, Christian, and pagan and neo-pagan groups in that regard. But at this conference, I was particularly interested to hear about the Islamic apocalyptic and what was happening. And I was surprised, and most of my remarks are dealing with the papers from yesterday. I was surprised really at the similarities that I heard, more similarities than differences. So I found myself quite at home with some of the arguments that were raised. So I want to mention 4 issues that were, most of which were raised, and 1.5 of which was not raised, were not raised. And just kind of weigh in on them, and then I will pass it over to our concluding speaker. The first issue that was raised that sort of made my eyebrows lift was this whole issue of, is it Islam? And I actually found it odd that scholars would be weighing in on what I would think would be an intra-Islamic argument. And certainly this goes on within the Christian world. You know, was David Koresh a Christian? Was Jim Jones a Christian? And it goes back and forth and back and forth. I don't actually think as a scholar it's my role to make that pronouncement. I mean, I think I could say they're drawing upon Christian texts, or they're drawing upon marginal Christian texts, or they're, but to say it's Islamic or not Islamic, I mean, unless the whole definition of scholar, which it very well may, be changing, I actually don't think that's our role. So on the other hand, I love the discussion about Islamists and the problematizing of that term, and I found that quite informative and quite useful. So that was something I actually gained out of this, and I'd like to see more written about that to clarify it, because I think it's important that our language be clear, so that we don't alienate our friends at the same time we're talking about a phenomenon that, at least in my opinion, is or can be problematic. An issue that was raised had to do with the historical Islamic apocalyptic. And while some of this I found the hardest to stay awake through, not because of the speakers, but you know, when it starts going, I'm a sociologist, so, you know, so I'm going, But I did find this interesting because it gives evidence to the way these ideas have existed and endured through time, the way these ideas are embedded in traditions, and certainly that's true of Christianity as well. That said, to me, the question remains, why do some people listen and respond to them in some periods of time, more so than others? Why do people attempt to use Richard's language, roosters? And here, I would say, I think sociology and the social sciences, with the exclamation mark, have a contribution they can make to millennial studies in furthering our understanding of why apocalyptic images and discourse may mobilize people in certain times and places. And I would particularly suggest that social movement theory can add something to this. I mean, social movement theory would say that in order to trigger mass mobilization, you need mutually reinforcing actions, triggering mistakes of governments and policies, and that these always precede mobilization. And so I guess my point is these ideas have been in these traditions for millennia, but sometimes they're used and sometimes they aren't. Sometimes people listen to owls and sometimes roosters. And so looking at the I love the idea of the climate issues and the sociological issues might improve our understanding of when these ideas become powerful actors and encourage people to act upon them. Another idea that was both, I think, raised and not raised, see, I'm almost through my list, I got 2 more things to go, is the importance of ideas and beliefs. Now, I actually think you can use social movement theory and so forth, and that doesn't necessarily mean that you don't think these ideas are important. And in fact, most of my work, as those of you who know it, would suggest that in fact it is important. But why is it important? And what should we do about it? And here I go back, and I really wish he was here, to the work of Stephen O'Leary. So I'm not sure whether it's in the purview of this gathering to suggest what might be done to alleviate or ward off the percolating violence linked to, in the case of this conference, Islamic apocalyptic, but certainly not exclusively to this, as we all know. But many in the world would deeply appreciate it if we could draw upon our understandings of the phenomena to suggest a range of possible next steps. And I've wondered about this. If not, are we sort of like aberrant scientists who study the bubonic plague without investigating cures? One danger of studying these absolutist worldviews is that we can readily ourselves become absolutists, which has been brought up several times. Now, I actually think if no one in the world had any religious beliefs, we would still there would still be people murdering people and thinking about murdering us all and bringing the world down, because I have a lot of confidence in human desire to kill other humans. I've seen it, right? But still, these ideas are in fact kind of tools that people can use to advance this, or not. Now, at least this is what I think about when I think about Stephen O'Leary's work on the apocalyptic, which is why I miss his voice today. Elements of these ideas are part of our cultural heritage. So what do we do about them? We expect to carefully store material bombs, right? We really do. But what about ideas? Ideas that are bombs, ideological bombs, to point a phrase. I mean, I'm on the fence about this, because who gets to decide which ideas are dangerous? I still consider myself using an archaic term, a feminist, and I know a lot of ideas that I embrace are considered quite ideologically destructive by others. So there's an issue there about what's going to be classified in this way. But still, in fact, as some of the numbers that were quoted earlier today suggest, these ideas have been linked with some human destruction. And so what do we do? I think Stephen's suggestion was that we think about this comic interpretation, and how that gets implemented, I don't know. But to me, it seems to be something that might come out of this kind of study, is to say, these are a part of our heritages, they're not going away. What could, should, might we do about them? And finally, something that was not raised at all at this conference I would like to add is simply the whole idea of gender. One of the things that came up in our analysis of the Christian millennialism and apocalyptic in the modern day was the relationship of the attraction of these movements to those who were kind of the last gasp of patriarchy, so to speak. That these movements can present the opportunity to young men to do something that is new and still sexist. I sort of hear some of that in some of these Islamic groups as well. And I think that aspect of it, and that doesn't mean that you can't have women that do women's groups. I wrote my dissertation on Christian fundamentalist women, but there's a whole, quite nuanced understanding of that. So those are some of my comments and thoughts, and I hope that they contribute to our further understanding of this phenomenon.